So, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, tasliman kathira. Welcome everyone to our weekly halaqah. Today, alhamdulillah, we're grateful for Dr. Samir for joining us. And I would like to give you a short bio about Dr. Samir, the one he wrote. It's very short, but I'm sure if he wishes, he can give us like a maybe 30, 50 pages, but we'll take the short one. So Dr. Samir ElKamary is a pediatrician and an infectious disease epidemiologist working at the FDA and is an adjunct associate professor at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. He completed his medical school training at the Alexandria University Faculty of Medicine, Alexandria, Egypt. He completed his pediatric training in New York and his pediatric fellowship at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. His MPH degree at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. He immigrated to the US in 1995 and moved to Maryland 1999, where he has lived since then. And today's topic, inshallah, he will talk about Al-Muhajereen Al-Ansar in the United States. So please go ahead, Dr. Sam.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed. Jazakallah kull khair. Let me just figure how to bring this up. I'm sharing the screen. Can you see anything?
Yes, mashallah.
Because for me, I cannot see what I'm sharing. This is, why is it saying it's supposed to say you're sharing screen?
We can see that you are viewing Samir ElKamary's screen. We can see the presentation in PowerPoint mode, actually.
You can see it?
Yes.
Oh. Can you see it like in presentation slide?
Presentation slide, yes.
Not the editing mode?
No, presentation.
I'm seeing it as the editing mode, okay. So you see the first slide says Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim?
No.
Okay. So thank you very much, Brother Ahmed and Noor Center for allowing me to talk today, inshallah. Alhamdulillah, Ahmed has been asking me for a while and I felt I really wanted to do this, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, had other plans for me and I was quite busy in the past few months. But alhamdulillah, now we have the opportunity to talk about this topic, which is actually something I've been thinking about for a while. And I'm glad this presentation gave me the opportunity to talk about it. So this is the topic that I chose, which sounds a little provocative, is the Al-Muhajereen Al-Ansar in the United States. And it's really something that I believe applies very well to us. And it is actually something we should think about very clearly because we are in a way Muhajereen and some of us are also Ansar. And when we think in those terms, then we understand our duties and our rights in this country, not just simply as visitors or people who do not belong to this country. And I think this is a very important thing to think about, especially for young people who are living here, who do not quite, still for them, it's different than where for those of us who have actually left our home countries and come here, because for them, they were born here. And so for them, this is their country. And we need to understand that and accept that. And if we don't, we will be losing a good number of our young people when they feel that this is not really what represents them. All right, forgive me for a second. I'm just trying to make sure I am looking at the screen so I'm not looking sideways when you see me. All right. Give me a second. Can you still see the full screen or is it smaller now?
No, we don't see the presentation. We see your desktop.
Okay. It says sharing. Let me try this. All right, I'll do it again, okay?
Now it's in edit mode.
Yes, that's the problem. I'm trying to bring it up on, I minimized it and I'm unable to bring it up again. Oh, this is so terrible. So sorry.
ElKamary may consider putting it in a presentation mode and then click on it. You should see a presenter mode. So we will see the presentation mode and you will see the presenter if you have two screens.
Thank you. Just the problem is that it's minimized itself. The presentation itself has minimized itself and I'm unable to bring it up again. That's the problem.
We can still read it, Dr. Samer.
Now,
We can still read it, so you can use it as such and we can still see it.
well, let me just, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut it down and open it up again. Maybe that way I'll be able to control it better. I apologize. Usually this is much smoother, but I usually use the other computer where we have Zoom set up in a different way for work. All right, you should, now I can do it. All right, you see it now?
Yes.
All right, alhamdulillah. All right, so why did I choose this topic? Well, basically it's the timing. We, as you know, alhamdulillah, kul aam wa antum bikhair, we celebrated the new Islamic Hijra year and the beginning of the year of 1443, and it marks the Hijra of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Mecca to Medina. Then there's also another interesting Hijra that happened this very same month of Muharram, which is the 10th of Muharram or Ashura, where the Bani Israel, the children of Israel, left Egypt and in their migration with Prophet Musa alayhi salam. So this month is actually a month of two Hijras. The Islamic Hijra and the Bani Israel Hijra. So I thought this would be a good topic to talk about at this time of the year. And as why I selected this title is because as Muslims in the United States, we were either immigrants or we were born here. And if we immigrated, can we be considered Muhajereen? If we were born here, are we Ansar? If we've lived long enough here, can we be considered Ansar? And to go back to that, let's start with the meaning of the word Hijra itself. The Handsworth Dictionary of Modern Written Arabic states that Hijra is departure, exit, emigration, exodus, and immigration. It means both leaving and coming. But in Islam, the word Hijra is specifically used to describe the immigration of Muslims from Mecca to either Habasha, Abyssinia, which is now Ethiopia, or in more specific terms, as Muslims, we tend to think of the Hijra as the immigration of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his migration from Mecca to Medina in 622 AD. Are you, okay, hold on. You said, I get the message. So now we have another problem. It's not moving forward. So my actual, the screen that I'm looking at is moving, but for some reason, here we go, let's try this again. Okay, so let's talk about the types of Hijra. There's the mechanical Hijra, the physical migration, which is basically a process of moving either across an international border or within a state. This has nothing to do with Islam or any religion. This is just a process of moving. It could include refugees, displaced persons, uprooted people, and economic migrants. We'll find that a lot of the people who are our colleagues here in the United States, who are professionals, especially even laborers, people who have a skill, have come to the United States as economic migrants, looking for better opportunities to have a future and a career for themselves. Religious migration, however, also happens, and it occurs in times of religious persecution. And the intention is to seek religious freedom. And this has happened a long time, from the time of Bani Israel leaving Egypt, from the time of the Quakers coming to the United States to flee persecution in England, and many other examples. The example of the Muslims and the Jews fleeing from Andalus when it fell to the Spanish Christians, and the Inquisition and the pogroms that happened in World War II, and so forth. There are many. The pogroms started happening in Russia, and then the persecution of Jews in Europe in World War II. So there's always been a lot of religious migration throughout history. The religious hijra is not just for Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is for most of the messengers of Allah. In fact, almost all of them have had to do some kind of a hijra. It's been a sunnah of the messengers of Allah alayhi salam. Most of them immigrated from their own villages or countries to other places to spread the teachings of Tawheed or oneness. Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, for example, immigrated from Babylon, which is Babel. I discovered that the word Babel actually, the closest meaning in Arabic is Babullah. It was the doorway to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's an old Sumerian text that was converted. The term comes from the Sumerian language, but it also has an equivalent in Arabic. And so he immigrated from Babylon, where he was. The king Nimrud tried to kill him by burning him alive, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved him. And then he moved to different places until he settled in Al-Khalil, or modern day Hebron, which is in Palestine, where he lived and died and was buried there. We also have the example of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, who migrated from Egypt to Madian, where he married the daughter of Prophet Shu'aib alayhi salam and stayed with him for 10 years. And then Prophet Musa alayhi salam also migrated again with Bani Israel out of Egypt. Then of course we have the most famous hijrah, which is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who at the beginning of Islam ordered the Muslims to migrate to Habasha or Abyssinia twice to flee religious persecution by Quraysh. And then he himself migrated to Medina when Quraysh was determined to assassinate him after his uncle Abu Talib, who protected him, had died. And after he died, he had no more protection, and they were planning to assassinate him. So as you know the story, he went with Abu Bakr as-Siddiq to Medina. So the Muhajireen and Ansar became the two groups of people that came together in Medina. All of you probably know this very well, but I'll just quickly go over it. The Muhajirun were the first converts to Islam with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who lived in Mecca, and they finally immigrated with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Mecca to Medina. The Ansar were the tribes of Al-Aus and Al-Khazraj, who lived in Yathrib at the time, which later became called Medina after the Hijra. And they were the local inhabitants of Medina who welcomed the Muhajireen into their homes when they came from Mecca. The Muhajireen were held in very high regard. They gave up their wealth, their homes, their lands, their crops, their animals, and even their families to give support to Allah and His Messenger to establish His religion. At the time, most of the wealthy people in the whole Arabian Peninsula were from Mecca. So many of these people who left Mecca were extremely wealthy, and they left all this behind to go and fulfill their duty to support Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Allah has honored them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has honored them in more than 20 ayah in the Quran. This ayah is the one I found specifically encapsulates a lot of you know this ayah, and encapsulates very much the spirit of how the Muhajireen really did make a huge sacrifice. This is in Surah Al-Imran, ayah 195. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فالذين هاجروا وأخرجوا من ديارهم وأوذوا في سبيلي وقاتلوا وقتلوا لأكفرن عنهم سيئاتهم وليدخلنهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ثوابا من عند الله والله عنده حسن الثواب. صدق الله العظيم. And the translation is that those who migrated, which is the Muhajireen, or were expelled from their homes and were persecuted for my sake and fought, and some of them were martyred, I will certainly forgive their sins and admit them into gardens under which rivers flow as a reward from Allah. This is a huge testimony and a huge testament and a promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for these people who did this hijrah. What about Al-Ansar? Where Al-Ansar demonstrated a beautiful model and a great example in practically demonstrating the meaning of generosity, equality, and selflessness. they truly gave from themselves to support the Muhajereen, just because they came with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just because they were Muslims, the first Muslims, and they were honored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it shows you the purity of the heart of the Ansari. Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu said, the Ansar said to Prophet Muhammad to divide the palm trees between them and their brothers. Now remember, Medina was an agricultural city. They had a lot of palm fields, and they produced a lot of the fruits and vegetables of the area. And they told Prophet Muhammad, so now they own palm trees, which are not easy to plant in the desert. But they said, let's divide the palm trees between us and the Muhajereen. Imagine that. Imagine you having a guest come to your home and they say, let me give him half my land and half my house, and let him take one of our cars, and let us just do that. But Prophet Muhammad said no. The Ansar said, all right, you farm the land and we will share the produce. And the Muhajereen answered, we agree. So in that way, they were giving them the plants, and the Muhajereen will do the effort. And that way it's a sharaka, it's a true partnership, and not just a giveaway to the people who came with them. Because both groups had a lot of pride, and both of them were trying to be as welcoming and generous with the other. Also, another example of the Ansar was Abdurrahman ibn Auf, whom we know was a very rich Meccan, and he left everything behind and came with Prophet Muhammad. And at the time, he said that Prophet Muhammad established the brotherhood between him and Sa'd ibn al-Rabi'a. As you know, each Muhajir was paired up with an Ansari, and the Ansari was supposed to help them adapt and live in Medina and work with them. So Sa'd ibn Rabi'a said to Abdurrahman ibn Auf, I am the richest one among the Ansar. I will give you half of my money and see which of my wives you like, and I will divorce her for you to marry her after her waiting period. This man is giving him literally half of his home, half of everything he owns, including his own family. And he sincerely meant it. Now, of course, in our modern times, none of us can even imagine doing something like this. But subhanAllah, at that time, they were doing it for the sake of Allah. And Abdurrahman ibn Auf replied, I do not need all that, but is there a market where I can trade? He just wanted to use his skills that Allah gave him to earn his living. And Sa'd answered, Qaynuqa' market, which is at the time there was the market of the Jews. And Abdurrahman went there. And soon after that, he, as many of you know the story, he managed to get married and was able to give the bride a piece of gold the size of a date seed. And after that, he became very wealthy. And subhanAllah, he became one of the wealthiest people in Medina after that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also honored the Ansar in the Quran. In Surah At-Tawbah, ayah number 100, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ وَالَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوهُمْ بِإِحْسَانٍ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضَوْا عَنْهُ وَأَعَدَّ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي تَحْتَهَا الْأَنْهَارُ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أَبَدًا ذَلِكَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. As for the first of the immigrants and the helpers, which are the Ansar, and those who follow them in goodness, Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with Him, and He has prepared for them gardens under which rivers flow, to stay there for eternity. That is the ultimate triumph. That much value Allah has placed on these Muhajereen and Ansar for what they did. Now, for us today, is religious Hijra still valid? Now, of course, it will not be the same as the Hijra of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That Hijra was once. But for us, is there a religious Hijra? And yes, there is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that, the example in the Quran when the angel was speaking to the people who, after they died, and if they were being persecuted, especially for the religion, then there's no doubt. And this is, as you can see from this ayah, in Allah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, إن الذين توفاهم الملائكة ظالمي أنفسهم قالوا فيما كنتم قالوا كنا مستضعفين في الأرض قالوا ألم تكن أرض الله واسعة فتهاجروا فيها فأولئك مأواهم جهنم وساءت مصيرا. When the angel sees the souls of those who have wronged themselves, scolding them, what do you think you were doing? Because these people were basically committing sins or were not worshiping Allah or just following whoever was there. For example, if they were told to worship idols, they worshiped idols. They did the wrong things that the kuffar around them were telling them to do. And they told them, what were you doing? They said, we were oppressed in the land. So they were trying to live in that land, even though they were not allowed to practice their faith. And the angels will respond, was Allah's earth not spacious enough for you to emigrate? It is they who will have hell as their home, and what an evil destination. So in a sense, if you are living in a place where you are truly being persecuted, not allowed to practice your faith, and you do not go somewhere where you can, you will be punished. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish people who do not move to a place where they can feel the sense of the freedom that they need. And obviously for those who cannot, for any reason, financial, physical, or other reasons, then these are exempt. But I'm talking about people who are completely free to move around, but don't, because they just don't want to let go of the existing advantages that they have and privileges, then they are going to be confronting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Yawm al-Qiyamah as to why they did not leave and go to somewhere else on this earth. And note that this is not specifically limited to a particular land or a country. This says anywhere. You can move anywhere on earth in order to be able to feel free to practice your faith. So can we really worship anywhere? Is it all right to pray anywhere? Nabi Allah, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, أعطيت خمسا لم يعطهن أحد من الأنبياء قبلي نصرت بالرعب مسيرة شهر وجعلت لي الأرض مسجدا وطهورا فأيما وفي رواية وأيما رجل من أمتي أدركته الصلاة فليصلي وأحلت لي I'm sorry وأحلت لي المغانم وفي رواية الغنائم ولم تحل لأحد من قبلي وأعطيت الشفاعة وكان النبي يبعث إلى قومي خاصة وبعثت إلى الناس عامة وفي رواية كافة. So the Prophet ﷺ said, I was given 5 things which none of the prophets before me was given. I was helped by terror for the journey of a month in advance of my arrival to fight my enemies. This basically means that whenever he decided to go on a ghazwa, the people, the place where he's going, were terrified ahead of time. And as you know, the one thing that weakens any army is fear, terror of an enemy. So this is something Allah has given him, specifically Prophet ﷺ, to be able to win in battles, that ahead of the time that he goes there, the people will already be afraid and ready to surrender. Then the second thing was that, and the earth was made a mosque and purification for me. Anywhere in the world, we can pray. It's not the same in other faiths. For Christians, they can only pray in their church. For Jews, they can only pray in their temple. But for us, we don't have to pray in a masjid. We can pray anywhere. And Prophet ﷺ said, whenever a man has to pray, then he should pray. Like if you're traveling, if you're on the road, you can just stop on the side of the road and find a clean spot as long as it's tahur and just start praying. And this is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can go anywhere in the world and pray. And the next thing that Allah has made available to Prophet ﷺ specifically was that war spoils were made halal for him as a prophet. Before that, prophets were not allowed to collect war spoils. Prophet ﷺ was also granted intercession. On the Day of Judgment, he will be the only prophet that will be able to intercede on behalf of his ummah. And then, and most importantly for all of us, is that each prophet was sent to his people specifically, but Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was sent to all human beings, all people in general. So anywhere we go, we should talk about Islam. We should explain it to wherever we go, because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his message was sent to the whole planet, not just the Middle East or the Far East or certain countries. It was sent everywhere. And it is our duty to deliver that message. So in the United States, are we Muhajereen? Are we Ansar? Some of us are, but most of us are not, I'm sure. But can we become Muhajereen and Ansar? And I believe, inshallah, we can become like them if we follow in their footsteps. And I'll try to explain that a little as we go ahead. So the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, why did we immigrate? Most of us probably did not migrate due to religious persecution. Most people were refugees, displaced persons, uprooted people, economic migrants. Of course, there are some of us who were religiously persecuted and came here to get a sense of freedom. But really, what is religious persecution? I think we have to think about that carefully, because we tend to think of religious persecution as somebody preventing you from praying. Like we see now what's happening to the Uyghur Muslims in China. That is clearly overt and covert religious persecution. There is no question about it. And if they decide to leave and go somewhere else, they will be fully within their right from a religious perspective and legal perspective to do that. But what about other places? Like, back home in our countries, those of us who came from Egypt, from Pakistan, from Iran, from Morocco, from Palestine, from many of these countries. Were we being religiously persecuted? Well, the question is, are you free to practice Islam freely in your home country? And to answer that question, you have to go into a little more detail. Were you able to apply Sharia in your home and community? In some countries, in some Muslim countries, I'm not sure if Tunis is still the same, they were not allowed to marry more than one woman. I think it was in Tunis, but I don't know if they've changed that law. There's some other Muslim countries where you're not allowed to marry the woman, but that is in the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed it in our in the legal and Sharia requirements in Islam that you can if you are capable of it. Are you able to raise your children in the Islamic way? Do you find justice if you are wronged? It is a tenet of Islam to be treated justly. Do you feel safe to speak your mind? Do you feel you are treated as an equal everywhere? If not, then you are in fact being persecuted, since these are all your rights as a Muslim. And if they were being violated or you're not free to practice them, then you are being religiously persecuted, even if it's not overt persecution. And leaving and coming to another country is indeed allowed for you. So let's look at a couple of hadiths from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam explaining the rights of a Muslim. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تحاسدوا ولا تناجشوا ولا تباغضوا ولا تدابروا ولا يبع بعضكم على بعض وكونوا عباد الله إخوانا. المسلم أخو المسلم لا يظلمه ولا يخذله ولا يحقره. التقوى ها هنا. And then ويشير إلى صدره 3 مرات. بحسب امرئ من الشر أن يحقر أخاه المسلم كل المسلم على المسلم حرام دمه وماله وعرضه. Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu reported that Prophet ﷺ said, don't envy or nurse a grudge, and don't nurse aversion or enmity, and don't bid, meaning your brother, your Muslim brother, bid him out for raising the price, and don't enter into a transaction where others have entered into that transaction, and be as fellow brothers and servants of Allah. A Muslim is the brother of a Muslim. He neither oppresses him nor humiliates him nor looks down upon him. The piety is here. And then he said that while pointing to his chest 3 times. It is a serious evil for a Muslim that he should look down upon his brother Muslim. All things of a Muslim are inviolable for his brother in faith, his blood, his wealth, and his honor. In another hadith, Prophet ﷺ said, Rasulullah ﷺ قال إياكم والظن فإن الظن أكذب الحديث ولا تحسسوا ولا تجسسوا ولا تنافسوا ولا تحاسدوا ولا تباغضوا ولا تدابروا وكونوا عباد الله إخوانا. Abu Huraira reported Prophet Muhammad ﷺ saying, avoid suspicion, for suspicion is the gravest lie in talk, and don't be inquisitive about one another, and do not spy upon one another, and do not feel envy with the other. And nurse no malice, and nurse no aversion and hostility against one another, and be fellow brothers and servants of Allah. So are we Muhajereen? Well, if you have immigrated because in your original homeland, you are constantly needing to protect yourself, your family, and your property. If others displayed vicious envy towards you, begrudged you, or displayed enmity towards you, if you were feeling cheated, exploited, or humiliated, if you're being looked down upon or treated unfairly, if you felt that your blood, your wealth, and your honor were being violated, if you felt you're being spied upon and denied your rights, then these are all rights of a Muslim. Hence, you are actually being persecuted and not allowed to enjoy your rights as a Muslim. And it is perfectly justifiable for you to immigrate. Well, what about the Ansar? Who are the Ansar in the United States? Or any country for that matter? When you immigrate to a country, the Ansar will be the Muslims who are living there and came before you. Or they're the Muslims who are born there. They know the country, they know the society, they know the history, they know the people, they know the law of the land and the rights and responsibilities. They know where to find jobs and education and opportunity. They help you, just like the Ansar of the time of Prophet Muhammad in Medina. They help you, they share with you knowledge, they share money, guidance, emotional, social support. These will be the true Ansar in whichever country you go to. So the question is, are you a Muhajir or Ansari? What about your children who are born here? You teach, now, obviously, if they're born here, this is their home. So are you teaching them to become a true Ansari? Did you yourself live here a long time and consider yourself an Ansari now? Or do you still think of yourself as a Muhajir? What else is an Ansari? Well, number one is that they are a true citizen of this country. You have to accept that this is your country and you have to obey its laws and follow its rules. And you have to be someone who treats others, Muslims and Muslims, the way we should treat each other. We should educate them, the Ansaris are people who educate themselves about this country and be involved in the good and the bad. The good in order to do good and the bad to avoid it and to prevent it. We have to obey the laws of this land. We have to obey its laws. We have to obey its laws. Fortunately for us, we do not have laws in this land that violate our rights as Muslims, except for the right to marry more than one woman. But that again, there are actually other ways to do it if you really feel it's essential, when it's not illegal as well. But in general, the rest of the laws are not violated. You are in fact allowed to practice your laws, your religious requirements, rules freely. You have to also be involved in the community, the school boards, the political system. It's not just enough to be a spectator or to read the news. You actually have to be a citizen of the country. Now, because you have lived in this country and you have all the knowledge, it will facilitate your ability to help a new immigrant. And it could be very simple things, like once they come to this country, help them find a place to stay, teach them the language, the laws, the rights and responsibilities, get their children into the schools, help them find a job or an education, support them with kind words, with money, invite them into your home, and then gradually, as they settle down and become citizens themselves, gradually teach them to be an Ansar as well. Now, the question that a lot of people have thought about as they came here as Muhajireen is Islam really American, or are we new to this country? Are we alien to this country? Which is how, unfortunately, since September 11, many of us have felt that way because of the aggression and the way the media has treated the topic of Islam and Muslims. So is Islam really American? And this is important for our children as well, because they are born here. Do they feel this is their country and that their faith is the right to practice it in this country because it is an American faith? Or is it an alien faith from the Middle East or the Far East and is not really an American religion? Well, let's look at what we know. Many historians claim that the earliest Muslims came from the Senegambian region of Africa in the early 14th century, which is now Senegal and Gambia, two different countries. In the 14th century, that was long before the establishment of the United States in 1776. The Moors, or the Maghariba, who were expelled from Spain after the fall of Andalusia, made their way to the Caribbean and possibly the Gulf of Mexico. When Christopher Columbus himself made the journey to the Americas, it is said he took with him a book written by Portuguese Muslims who had navigated their way to the New World in the 12th century after the Andalus fell. So he used that book to guide him. In fact, a man named Estefan accompanied the Spanish as a guide to the New World in the early 16th century in the conquest of what would become Arizona and New Mexico. 10 to 15% of the Africans who were abducted and forcibly brought as slaves to the United States were Muslims. And then we had multiple waves of immigrants. Between 1878 and 1924, there were Muslim immigrants from the Middle East, particularly from Syria and Lebanon. They arrived in large numbers and settled in Ohio, Michigan, Iowa, and even the Dakotas. In 1952, after the creation of Israel in 1948 and the takeover of Egypt by the military, an entire new group of Muslims came from places such as Palestine, Iraq, and Egypt. Then the 1960s saw waves of Southeast Asian Muslims also making their way to America. American Muslims also came from Africa, Asia, and even Latin America. There are Muslims from South America who moved to the United States. Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers and the third president, in 1765, while he was studying law, he purchased an English translation of the Quran. And this is in the Library of Congress. This copy of the Quran is in the Library of Congress. This is the picture of Thomas Jefferson. He actually read it, and he used a lot of its tenets to write the Constitution. And he authored the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. And he explained that the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom was designed to protect all faiths. And he said that this faiths being the Jew and the Gentile, the Christian and the Mohammedan. At that time, they used to think of Islam as being just like Christians call themselves Christian because of Christ, that Muslims were really calling themselves Mohammedan because of Muhammad. But they meant the Muslims at the time. And he specifically mentioned the Muslims when he described the broad scope of protections he intended with this legislation, which was finally passed in 1786. Why is all of this important? This is very important because our children view this country as their home. They don't view Egypt or Pakistan or Iran or Palestine or Morocco or Tunisia or Senegal or Nigeria or wherever they came from as their home, as where we came from. They don't think of those as their homes. Their home is here in the United States. And in order for them to not feel a dissociation from us and from everything that comes from those lands, we need to accept this country as our home too. We need to start, for those of us who have lived here long enough, settled down, had children, if we need to think of ourselves as no longer as Muhajereen, but as citizens and Ansar for new Muhajereen coming to this country. And until we do that, we are going to be disconnected from our children. And we need to teach them that Islam is also American, and it's not an alien belief in the Middle or Far East. Otherwise, as they grow up and become independent, they will find themselves forced to choose one or the other, either the United States with all that the media is telling them is the United States, and their parents, and all their parents are telling them what they really are. They will have to choose. And most likely when they become independent and have their own job and have their own family, they tend to drift away. And we know that there are many youth who don't come to the masajid. They don't pray anymore. Some of them decided they're not Muslim anymore. They call themselves, oh yeah, I'm Muslim by ethnicity, instead of saying that they really are believing in Islam. They say, oh, that's the faith of my parents. I'm not sure really if it's my faith. I'll have to think about that. So we have to be understanding that this starts in the home, in our home. That if we don't think of this country as our home, they will not think the same either. And they will feel that this is an alien place for them, and then that this is their home, and they'll feel that what we bring forth is alien to them. So we need to stop thinking of ourselves as Muhajereen and start thinking of ourselves as Ansar. We are here, we are teaching our children to also be Ansar, and we are welcoming new Muhajereen and helping them to settle down and become eventually Ansar as well, inshallah. And I think this is it. Jazakumullahu khairan wa shukran lakum. And I welcome any questions.
Jazakumullahu khairan, Dr. Samer. It's a very good idea from that. I have never thought about it before, but I think the way you have been doing what you have been doing for everyone who comes recently to the States, maybe you have that idea in mind for a long time. So I can mention maybe now that you are the first person I have seen in the US. You came to DC to drive me back to Baltimore. You found me a place to stay. So you actually practice what you said. So Jazakumullah khair.
Jazakallah khairan.
So I will open the floor for questions or comments, ideas, thoughts.
Jazakumullah khairan, Dr. Samer. I think this was excellent. And you really broaden the understanding of the Muhajereen and Ansar. And as the Quran described them, that by function. And so whoever carries that function is imitating the early generations of our righteous companions. I think that there is a lot of disconnect between the indigenous Muslims and the immigrant Muslims. And if we are able to bridge that gap, I think as a community would be extremely powerful. But so far, I think that we have a big gap and a chasm between us and our African-American brothers and sisters and other Muslims who have been living here for centuries. Do you have any comment on that?
Thank you very much. I think this is an extremely important point you brought up. It is true. We are indeed not integrated with the local Muslims, the Ansar of this country. And I think it's a self-inflicted wound. I think we intentionally isolate ourselves. And I've seen many people come from their home countries and they specifically look for their own kind. They make no attempt to mix with the groups that live here. Part of it is a sense of, like we said, they still feel they are Muhajereen. They don't feel they are, citizens, so they want to be with their own kind. They think of their home country as being back home, where they're trying to travel there every year and go and see their families there, but they don't really mingle and see families here. It's also, I hate to say this, but there's also an element of racism. There's this thing about people who are Arabic speaking tend to avoid people who are not Arabic speaking. Specifically, African Americans who live here, they don't feel that they are similar to them and they don't want to mix with them. And the African Americans obviously don't feel welcome, and so they don't try to reach out either. I think we need to break the ice. I mean, we need to extend a welcoming hand to them. We need to go and attend their masajid. We need to start praying in their masajid and making friends there. We need to donate more to their masajid. We need to mix with them, like our children mix with their children. Because if you know, anyone who's raised a child here, they don't have an issue with other children. Like if your child is, for example, from Egypt, and in the school they have an African American friend, they'll be completely fine with it. They have no problem. It is the adults that are having the problem. And I think we sometimes have self-isolated ourselves economically as well. Those of us who are professionals, who are high earners, don't mix with African Americans who are traditionally economically challenged and are living in areas that are far away from us and do not go to the same places we go to. So I think the one place where we can actually meet and mingle and get to know them is the masajid. I am fortunate enough that one of the masajid close to me is a purely African American masjid, and I go to pray there a lot, and I try to intermingle with their leaders and to get to know them better. But I do need to do more. But the thing is that we need to start. If they haven't started, we need to start. It's easy for us to find them. We know where they are. It's hard for them to find us. So I agree with you completely. We have isolated ourselves, and in that way, we have created separate communities, ahzab, in a way. We have isolated ourselves into sects, the Egyptian sect and the Syrian sect and the Palestinian sect and so forth. And then all of us together as Arabs against the non-Arabs, and then Arabs and the Indo-Pacs against the African Americans and so forth. You're right. We need to stop thinking of ourselves in those sense. And I'm hoping that we teach our children and they do a better job of bringing together all these groups, inshallah. And we can continue trying our best, but I think it's probably going to take a generation before we do mingle and become a strong community in that sense. Allahu A'lam.
Any other questions or comments?
Assalamu alaikum, brother Samir.
Alaikum assalam.
Alhamdulillah, brother. I just one of the things I really appreciate your talk, and I like how you've kind of shown the two different aspects, or two different roles that we can play here in the States. So I'm involved with the youth a lot, and what I'm finding is, because you're talking about generationally, right?
That's right.
That generationally, we should be moving closer to integration and better communication, and lack of racism and such. So the more I'm around these youth, what I'm realizing is that a lot of these kids that I deal with, as an example, think that homosexuality is okay. What I was also surprised to find out that a lot of our youth see tattoos or having tattoos is something also normal, right? The ideological makeup of the I guess soon to be Ansar or present day Ansar doesn't seem to be ideologically aligned with the Prophet ﷺ when he came to Medina, and they took on those specific traits of what we consider Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So the question that I have for you is, these current Ansar, or the people who are supposed to be absorbing the immigrants and such, it seems like الفكر متشتت جدا. يعني everybody, a lot of things that I didn't consider prevalent in youth, because I deal with them on a regular basis in large groups. I see that there's a massive amount of different ideologies and opinions, and quite frankly, a lot of things that don't associate with what we believe or ideologically align with the Prophet ﷺ. So can you touch on that just real briefly? I know it's a lot.
Jazakallah khair, brother. Well, you're absolutely correct. We do have a huge distance between what the youth nowadays think and understand, learning through school and media, and what we need to educate them. It is very hard to bridge that gap, especially if they've been brought up in an atmosphere and a society where all this is normalized. I know that one of the mashayikh here in America, his name is Yasser al-Qadi. I don't know if you know him. He has multiple lectures on the issue of homosexuality, sexuality, tattooing, a lot of these things. He has beautiful lectures and explains them very eloquently in English, because he was born here in the United States, and he went and learned in Saudi Arabia. Then he came back here and took his PhD from religious schools in California. And so he's extremely knowledgeable in these issues. And my thought is, as a parent, it's important to start introducing, well, let me back up a little bit. To teach, you're in a different situation. You're meeting youth that have already grown up and have these ideologies in their minds. But I think even before that, for those of us who have parents, who have children, we need to start at a very early age, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, to talk to our children about, what is acceptable in Islam. For example, it's perfectly all right to start telling your children, it's not right for a boy to have a girlfriend. It's not right for a girl to have a boyfriend. Right at the beginning, when they're still 7 or 8 years old. And I see a lot of parents hesitate to bring up the topics of sex and sexuality and homosexuality to children as young as that age, because they start learning about these things by the age of 9, 10. If you wait until they're 12, it's too late. So as parents, we have to start there as Muslim parents. However, in your situation, it's different. You already have youth who have reached that age where they have already created these impressions in their mind and have the points of view. And I think it's a lot harder for someone like you, but what you can do, obviously, and what you're probably doing already without me telling you, is that you're teaching them the perspective from Islam, from the side of Islam. For example, if you want to talk about homosexuality, it is perfectly all right for you to say that, yes, it exists. We know it exists. And it's not a coincidence. Allah knows it exists. It's not something strange. But as long as they don't act on it, it's not haram. Because it's not the actual feelings or sensations that you feel which are inside you. It is your acting upon it. And as Muslims, we are not allowed to actually act. In fact, as Muslims, we're not even allowed to have straight sex. You have to be married before you can do that. Sexuality is a very protected and precious thing. And we need to be able to keep it within the confines of a marriage. And it is, all you can do is tell them, well, here's what Islam says. And not to exclude them, but say, I understand that you think this is appropriate, but it is appropriate, but not for Muslims, perhaps, because they don't believe in Islam. So for them, they can do it. They have the freedom to do what they wish. But for Muslims, we need to understand this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and show them some ayat of the Quran and perhaps the hadith if they exist on these topics. And explain it to them and leave them. Let them think, because a lot of youth that I've noticed, when they ask these questions, they sincerely want guidance. Even if they say it in a defiant way, even when they're saying it in a way that sounds like they're argumentative about it. I found that the strongest and best Muslims are the ones when they were in their youth were questioning, is Allah real? Is Islam a true religion? These are the ones that ultimately become true, strong Muslims, because they questioned these things at a time when they were thinking about it. And alhamdulillah, they had people who were able to answer them clearly and to show them the evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah. So all you can do is just show them the Quran and the Sunnah and leave them to their devices. And inshallah, Allah will guide them. It is not, it's not the fault of anyone of us, as long as we did not incite them to do that. But all we can do is tell them to do what's right and pray to Allah that He guides them. But you are correct. It is a challenge in this community. But let me tell you, it's not just here. This challenge has already reached the Middle East and the Far East. We are seeing the same diseases, the same problems, the same immoral and emotional challenges that they're facing here. They're also facing them over there. Promiscuity is rampant in the Middle East. Sexual harassment is rampant. Homosexuality exists everywhere in the Middle East, in those countries that we are surrounded by masajid and adhan 5 times a day. It is not just here. So may Allah give you the guidance and the protection and the thawab for what you're doing. I think it is an incredibly important task. And may Allah give you the patience to deal with it. It must be heartbreaking for you sometimes to see those youth and to hear them and talking about these things. But jazakallah kullu khairan. And thank you for your question. I hope I answered it appropriately.
Barakallah feek. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. Any final thoughts before we conclude?
I just have a couple of comments. It's not specifically like questions, but I'm not sure how much time we have. But if you do, I would like to share them with you.
Okay, we can give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So the first one, I really would like to thank Dr. Samer ElKamary for the excellent presentation. I think the whole idea of us thinking about ourselves as Muhajereen or Ansar, I think this is something that should be ingrained in our minds and should be passed from one generation to another, because I think it's really critically important. And it's basically we hold the torch, to continue to carry this message. So it's really very important, specifically for our kids to continue thinking this way. If we're going to consider them as Ansar. The comment that I really would like to make is about the mosques. I'd like to propose that we should better refrain from saying that these mosques are for the African Americans, or these mosques are for the Arabs, or those from Far East. I think that this would really be a slippery slope, and I'm not sure that we would like to go that way. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he talked about masajid, he said, إِنَّمَا الْمَسَاجِدُ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. So the mosques are for Allah, and don't call anyone other than Him. So it's better to call it the houses of Allah. Happens to be, or the goers or the patrons of these mosques, happen to be more of certain, ethnicity, but I prefer if we call it that way. Now, the question that came about, how can we get our brothers and sisters, who were the Ansar of this country? I think part of it had to do with what has already been mentioned, but another aspect of it could be, that numbers of the immigrants, coming from the Far East or coming from the Middle East or wherever, they happen to be far more than those who are actually considered here as the Ansar or the original Muslim inhabitants of this country. So maybe the balance in terms of the number is a little bit skewed. Now, I think the point is very important, which is how can we get integrated with all Muslims in general, and the original ones in particular, or the Ansar of this country. And one quick idea, raising the point is important, but why not to, perhaps think about having a periodic workshop, talking specifically about that. And for us who are really working in corporate America or professional organizations, that there was a recent move to have this IDE, or inclusivity, diversity, and equality. Almost like a committee is forming everywhere for whichever reason, but we can actually put the Islamic spin on it and make sure that we actually, in our masajids and our mosques and our organizations, we are actually thinking in a way that is actually really, inclusive and diversified, and with equality to everyone. So just a food for thought. The last comment about the kids. I know that there are actually tremendous efforts, and I know what Brother Wael has been doing, and may Allah bless him for what he's doing with the youth and others, around the mosque that I live close by. I think the whole thing, in my humble opinion, could revolve around bringing the kids more to the mosque, and try to make them as attached as possible to the mosque. And I know usually when we think about building a mosque or a property, the first thing comes to mind would be having a musalla. Then after that, having some services that would help the Muslim community, perhaps a school, or some professional offices. But why not to think about having a small room where we will have games for them, not really like the table tennis and the stuff that they are not necessarily so into it as Xbox, for example, and PlayStation. Why not to consider having these types of activities, and try to think of them as integral programs that should happen not only in monthly basis, but perhaps in weekly basis. And I would like to say even daily basis. The more we bring the kids actually to the mosque, they can't help it but to pray, but to hear a piece of information from here or there about the Islam and what's allowed, what's not allowed. And I know that this is happening in some mosques, but hopefully if this becomes a key, I don't know what, if we can have it as a key component of the planning of every single mosque or community, perhaps this can help bring them to the mosque more often and address some of the points that were made. That's all for me.
Jazakumullah khairan. So to answer your last comments, I think Brother Arif he is the head of our chapter here. As Mass Maryland is responsible for this center, and Mass in general has a policy about equality and integration, and has the same idea that you're talking about in corporate America. They already started that a couple of years back, because it originally everyone would think it's only for this area or that. And the Noor Center, Brother Arif, alhamdulillah, is leading the project of the new masjid. So he's thinking of an area for the youth, an area like a gym, and in the plan to have a basketball court. That's what brings the kids to the masjid, not the musalla. So although we would like them to come for prayer, but if we don't have the other things that will bring them, why would they come? So Jazakallah khairan. So
Bismillah, mashallah. That's great. Bismillah, mashallah.
Jazakumullah khairan.
So happy.
So to conclude, I don't want to keep everyone late. It's Maghrib time is already passed. Jazakum khairan, Dr. Samer, again for joining us today. Hopefully another time, inshallah. I have a question. Someone asked about the presentation. If you would like to share it with me, and I will share it with the group, if you don't mind.
Of course, absolutely. I'll be happy to, inshallah.
Jazakum khairan. I would like to remind everyone next week, inshallah, is the community meeting. It will be in the Noor Center. Maybe if you'd like to come and visit Dr. Hazim and Dr. Samer, I can share with you the address. It will be like around a bonfire, Brother Arif. So Brother Arif usually is the host for the community meeting, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Yes, inshallah, it will be around 11 o'clock. Are you talking about the
community meeting
breakfast?
next week?
The community meeting next week, yes, it will be in the evening. I will have, inshallah, a fire bit in there, and we'll have fire and the smoothie, s'mores, inshallah. Yes.
And you talked about the breakfast as well. Is it Sunday?
It is Sunday at 11 o'clock, inshallah. It is a potluck breakfast. That would be the first time we will be doing it at the Noor Center.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair.
Jazakumullah khair.